feller sitting on the steps outside. And so I walked up. If you're here before the pastor, either you're really excited for worship or something's really wrong. And so he was homeless. And we get to talk a bit before we come inside. He says, my name's Larry and I'm from Arkansas. I said, well, my name's Hansen, I'm from Arkansas. He said, where are you from? I said, I'm in this little bitty town you never heard of called Mountainburg, middle of nowhere. And he said, well, son, I'm from Mountainburg. I graduated in 1986. Well, that's when I was in second grade. I said, so you probably helped, some point on the playground, you might have helped me up the dinosaurs. Do you know about the dinosaurs? None of you know about the dinosaurs. I know about the dinosaurs because I'm from that place, and he's from that place. He said, oh my God, I haven't thought of that. We started talking about Old Lee Hill Road, and me learning how to swim over on Silver Bridge, and he probably was one of the teenagers out there drinking in this little spot that none of you have ever heard of. But to us, you're just saying the words, and we're right back there, right? You got a place like that in Kansas? We all have these places, right? And so I was able to just do that. And the whole beginning of before worship, my voice was down right back here. Right? And it was fun. Getting to know this guy. Place so often just reaches us in some way. And that's what this whole series is about. We're talking about where in the world are things in the Bible. And for people who were from Corinth, to read these stories, to hear these words, to hear about clanging cymbals, and to know that there was this group of religious people that in their worship, they had symbols and they clanged, so they knew those symbols. And when they ran into each other somewhere in Spain 20 years later and talked, oh, you're from Corinth, I'm from Corinth, remember those symbols? They could read the scripture and it would have touched them closely, just like Larry and I were able to catch up. So Corinth, we're going to talk about that. We're going to figure out what we can learn from Corinth. Where is it? What country is Corinth in? Greece. Someone over here had it. It's in Greece. And Greece is basically kind of two chunks of land. To the north, there's a lot of beaches, some big mountains, including Mount Olympus. Way up there is Thessaloniki, which we get another book of the Bible we might deal with later. Athens is on the bottom tip of the north section. You can go look in the map. It doesn't come out very well because the printer's struggling right now. But it's in there. Has anyone been to Athens? Nobody. Okay, last week we talked Rome. A lot of people have been to Rome. But it's that you've seen pictures of Athens. On the southern chunk is Sparta, smack in the middle. This is Sparta. And so in the whole southern chunk, we have even more beaches, lots of islands, smaller mountains, lots of history of serious warriors. Sparta, Troy. Troy was way far away. That's not even on your map anywhere close to it. Almost in the Black Sea. And in between the southern chunk and the northern chunk, there's this little spit of land about 3 or 4 miles across at the Narrows. And that's Corinth, connecting the north to the south. For as long as people live there, there's been this chunk and this chunk and this little bitty spit of land. In your map, it might not be very clear. Now there's a bridge way up on the northwest corner in this town called Patras. The town was there ages ago, but it didn't matter because there was no bridge back in Jesus' time. So back in those days, if you wanted to travel, you had to go through Corinth. There was no other choice unless you jumped on a boat and went north or south. So it was an important city for all those things, for trade, for military, for everything. However, it was more than just north or south. Because to the east of Greece, we have a sea called the Aegean Sea. To the west of Greece, there's a sea called the Ionian Sea. What sea is to the south? It's a big one. Mediterranean. Roz has got it. She got her first question here. Okay. And the Mediterranean, most of all, is really calm. When you go to the French Riviera, little bitty waves, no one's surfing there. If you go down to the northern coast of Africa, little bitty waves, no one's surfing there. You go over to Lebanon, little bitty waves. Easy to sail. Pretty much all the Mediterranean. You go on a cruise, and it's just nice. There's a little bit of breeze and nothing. Everything's calm except on the southern tip of Greece. And there, it is always windy, it is always stormy, it is really bad waves. You're caught. That was even a line in the song about storms. Now we know that Paul had at least three different shipwrecks he talks about in his letters, which he survived because there's lots of islands, he could land there. But all these shipwrecks in the Mediterranean, most of them happened right along that stretch, south of Greece. So it was dangerous. In all the Bible lands, it was the most dangerous place to sail in the known world 2,000 years ago. There's an ancient tombstone. We do all this archaeology. People go over there and look at things. They found an ancient tombstone where there's a captain who brags, and he says, I sailed around Greece 86 times, and I lived to tell about it. Which, I went down the canyon before I got my snow tires when it was black ice, right? I did it once, and I'm bragging about it, because that was an excellent driving. I'm an excellent driver. If you did it 86 times, you're just dumb. You're just not paying attention to the dangers that are out there, right? So when it's bad ice in the canyon, and you don't have your snow tires, you stay home, or you pick a different canyon, or you do something like that. In unless you're that dumb guy who did it 86 times, you didn't sail the southern coast of Greece. What did you do instead? Instead of sailing around, captains would take their little ships in from the east into Corinth, and they'd get off the ships, and they'd unload all their goods, and some longshoremen would put them on the carts and bring them 3 miles across to the other shipyard. They'd put it on a different ship. First captain's just hanging out. He has a glass of wine, going to jump back on the ship, grab some other goods, and go back the other direction. But his goods, they wander all the way over there. They get on another ship, and captain number 2 takes those goods, takes them off, and continues on to Italy or Spain or wherever that might be. So one captain has cared for the cargo, and another captain would care for the cargo until it comes back to Corinth. Does that make sense? Pretty simple. Okay, so I have been this church captain for 6+ years, 6 years and a few months, and starting in January, the session, that's our board of directors here, they have approved for me to go on sabbatical. What that means, it's been a busy 6 years. Have I ever looked tired up here? Yeah. So part of that is that I'm going to be resting and doing spiritual renewal and coming back with kind of an idea of how to keep this church growing, because it keeps growing, so that I don't shipwreck, so that I don't crash. So I'm going to take sabbatical with that. Amen? And I'm also, we won a grant, so that I can do some studying to learn how other homeless ministry places in Colorado, especially churches that work with public places, how do they do that so that we care for people really well and volunteers aren't burned out? So I'm going to go study that and learn how to do that and bring that back so we can do it better. Amen? Amen. And then come April 1st, right before Easter, I'm going to come back here and be able to lead the church again. Does that make sense? Amen? Okay, so the question is, I was the captain, who's the next captain? And the answer is, welcome to Jim Reed. Come on up here.
Thanks, Hansen. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Jim Reed. I know many of you because Susie and I have been attending off and on for the last year and a half or so. We're members at Westview Presbyterian, Longmont. I'm a commissioned pastor in our presbytery. There's a little write-up in your bulletin about that. So I've been trained to lead worship and preach and those kind of things. I've done that around the presbytery for about 20 years now. So when Hansen found out that I was a commissioned pastor, and I didn't tell him, he found out through others, he came to me and said, would you be willing to possibly stand in while he was gone for 3 months? And so I met with your session a few weeks ago, and I know many of you, and so looks like we're going to go down that road. So I'm going to be captain number 2 for about 3 months. So I'll be here 9 Sundays during the 3 months to lead worship and get to know you and do some pastoral care. I work full-time in Denver at the National Conference of State Legislatures. It's a bipartisan think tank that helps the states do better in making public policy. So that's my day job. So this is kind of a weekend gig for me, but I'm really excited to be here. We live over in Gilpin now, and so 20 minutes away. And we love the mountains. We ski, we hike, we do those kind of activities up here. Got 3 grown children. They're up and down the Front Range, and I'm just really looking forward to the opportunity to be with you for the early months of next year.
Jim's going to help us learn even more about Corinth. Because Jim tucks his shirt in. I don't even tuck his shirt in. Yeah. Sometimes in Nederland we have like regular people, and sometimes we have kind of rowdy people. Sometimes we have people that come in this church that have grown up. You've been in the church most of your life, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, pretty much. I was in the church most of my life, left for a while, tried some other things, tried out some of this, tried out. Some of you have been in Christian churches your whole life. Others of you, you left for a long time, you came back. Others of you, it's like, I didn't want anything to do with church, and all of a sudden something brought you in these doors, and you're here. Corinth was a lot like that in its diversity. It was a bunch of sailors. So it's pretty rowdy, right? Just imagine, it's pretty rowdy. And so you got a bunch of people who just want to live in a beautiful area, and there's all these rowdy people. But they come from all over the world, so people have all these different ideas on what religion is like. What do you know about that?
Well, you guys know about Jesus. He did his work in Israel-Palestine area, and then the people that Jesus influenced spread out across the Mediterranean and went to different places like Ephesus, and you mentioned Sparta and Athens and Corinth. And so Corinth was an important place because it was this crossroads that Hansen has described, and people came from all over the world for trade and for a variety of other purposes, carousing perhaps, and some of those activities. But basically, these followers of Jesus fanned out and spread the good news. And good news, as we well know, is love and grace, mercy, forgiveness. And so Paul brought that to Corinth, and some of his Paul's followers as well came, and Paul actually spent a fair amount of time in Corinth talking to the people there, and he set up the early church there. And so these early churches were organizations where people came together from all walks of life, rich and poor, men and women, longshoremen, and those in higher places in society. And so really Christianity was one of the first times when this broad, diverse group of folks came together under one umbrella, and that is God and our Lord Jesus, and sharing together and learning together and loving each other. So really when you think about society back then, it was pretty remarkable that these societies would embrace this Christian love and grace. But as we know, when you get people together, what happens? We're people, human nature, right? So we annoy each other. we eat different food. I'm gluten-free. Sorry, I don't eat meat. We have customs. We have rituals. We have things. We do things differently. And so the people of Corinth were no different than we are now. And so, we're in these organizations together. We're in church here together today. This is an organization that comes together to love and support each other. We're in other places together with others, our workplace, our schools, our country. We're together in our country. But we don't always get along, right? So Paul's words to us today are about love. This is how we can get along. He talks about clanging cymbals and gongs, and that analogy, I think, came from Corinth. Was a place where they did a lot of metalworking, and they made these metal sculptures and stuff. So clanging cymbals and banging gongs would have resonated with the people there. So he used some of that imagery. So what do we have coming up in a few weeks? We have that wonderful time of Thanksgiving where we come together to thank God and each other for the wonderful year we've had, and we give thanks for what we have, and we share our good fortune with others, right, through various ways. But when we sit down at dinner, there may be family members that we're not exactly agreeable with, maybe politically, or maybe we have religious differences, or who knows what. But we sit down at dinner, right, to try and remember that we're family. So one analogy that Hansen and I discussed, and he kind of put this on the table for me to develop a little bit, is what these letters that Paul wrote what if they were read at dinner tables there in Corinth, and we read it today in church. So people sit down, and rather than starting to argue, maybe we say, well, let's remember love is patient. Let's remember love is kind. So let's treat each other that way, even though we disagree on politics, or we've had some kind of a spat in church. Maybe there's some kind of controversy. We can reread these letters and remember that love does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not irritable or resentful. So that kind of brings us to the current times. Paul actually wrote 5 letters, and they were consolidated into 2, and it was a really diverse place. So this message of love was really important, so people could see beyond the differences and really get to know each other through love and grace and mercy, and giving each other a break, really. So with that, I guess the message is, our faith may waver, hope may wane, but love never fails. And as you said earlier in the service, the greatest of all these is love. And so that's kind of where I'll leave it. Hansen.
You know that. Everyone knows that love never fails. Everyone knows that love is this ultimate heartbeat of the world that carries us on through things. You know that now, but you're going to forget, won't you? At some point, you're going to forget how to do that. Tuesday, I left my house, and the election little envelope was sitting on my side table. And I said, Hansen, remember that election envelope? You got to go drop that off. It's Tuesday. You got to drop that off. Remember, Hansen? Remember, Hansen? Remember, Hansen? Did I remember? No. I left it in my house. I drove into church. Okay. We get done with all the work. We do everything I can on Tuesday. And I said, okay, I'll drive back there during lunch, grab that envelope, come back here, and it's like 5 o'clock, so I've only got 2 hours to turn this thing in. I'm sitting in that office right back there. I said, okay, Hansen, remember, got the envelope, it's all sealed, I've signed it, remember to turn it in. All you got to do is drive up there, just remember to turn it in. So I start driving up there. Did I remember to turn it in? No. Why is it so hard to remember? So I had to turn around from my house again, come drop it off. I'm sure all my candidates did just great. I'm sure everything I voted for did just great. But so often I try, and I drop something. If it's so hard for an election envelope, how much harder is it to hold on to patience, to hold on to kindness, to hold on to not being arrogant or rude? How hard is it? We keep reminding ourselves to hold on to love. But I did it again. I got angry. I got selfish. I hurt them. Now for the people of Corinth, it's no different. They have a different context, but it's no different than for us. It's hard enough to be church together on Sunday morning for an entire hour. Some of you, it's so hard to be in here for 1 whole hour with that person over there, which I get, I understand. But then how much harder is it in real life when you leave here? From Saturday to Monday and Thursday, all those other days, all those other hours, it's so hard to remember love. Now in the picture, in order to help us remember how they remembered love, in the picture on the side of your bulletin, it might come out a little better than the map did. You see some ruins because it's over there. There's always ruins everywhere. What's behind the ruins? A mountain, a hill. Yep, there's a mountain there, which is kind of weird rather than isthmus, but I guess Panama has a bunch of mountains too. So there is a hill. It's about 2 miles north of the highway that goes between the 2 shipyards. And above those ruins on the hill, today there's a couple of chapels, so you can zoom right in there on Google Earth and you can see these chapels. One's Greek Orthodox, one I don't even know what it is. But back in the day, the scholars, people who dig up and they sweep the rocks and everything, they say there was a temple there. There's a temple right there, and some of the evidence seems to be that this temple was a ritual building for a wide diversity of people. Kind of it doesn't matter where you're at on your journey, just come here and pray. So the idea, the theory, is that sailors would come there and pray. Please, God, give me calm seas. Please, God number 1, please, God number 17. Whatever it is, just like let's make our lives a little better. So that's a great theory. There's some evidence of that. However, other scholars disagree, and other archaeologists go there and they look at the same exact picture. Sometimes you do this. You watch the same video on YouTube, and one person says one thing, the other says another thing. Archaeologists come there and they dig up. They look at the same stela, the same picture. They know exactly the same thing. One thinks it's a temple, but the other half of the scholars actually think that building was a brothel. It's either church or a whorehouse. We don't know which one. 1 or 2. So some scholars think the sailors went there to pray. Some scholars think the sailors went there not to pray. Very much not to pray. I mean, that's what sailors do, right? I guess, I don't know. But we don't know. There's no way for us to know which is true, which I kind of like that. I think it's kind of neat that these folks, they had this ambiguous place that they would go because life was so complicated. They had this place, whatever it is, hiking up that mountain, whenever they did, you hope that it was remember love, but you hope that it wasn't just in church. It was in life. It was in the difficulty of life, in the complications of life. They had their good message. They had their bad influences. They had the full complication of real life, just like us. This mountain for me is a symbol of looking back in the Bible and thinking, God's love is here. There are all kinds of other influences here, and somehow I have to find a winding path to get to that. Somehow these mountains of ambiguity, we walk them. We all walk them, and we hopefully find a way to love.
I like the imagery of the mountain as a place of God's love. Now, I'm going to assume, Hansen, that maybe what was up there on that mountain was a temple, just for the sake of finishing this off here. My archaeologist research says, in fact, it was a temple. And really a mountain, as you've alluded to, or a hill in this case, but the mountains here, I think, represent aspiration in our lives. It's a symbol of God's great creation, really, and being here amongst the mountains, as we are in Nederland, Guilford County, this whole area, I think it resonates because ascending a mountain is it's like walking towards God. It's symbolic of our faith journeys in many ways. Moses ascended Mount whatever it was back in the day to get the 10 Commandments. Mount Sinai, right? So he went and had a mountaintop experience. You hear the term mountaintop experience. Jesus often ascended some of the hilltops nearby to go and pray, to be with God. So being where we are here, I know many of you have probably climbed mountains. I have. Maybe you've climbed one of the 14ers, which are the really tall 14,000-foot peaks. They're a challenge, right? It can become a pilgrimage to go up a 14er. You have to pack for the journey. You travel a long distance. You breathe thin air. And then when you get there at the top, it's really a spiritual experience, isn't it? I mean, you see the 360 views of our God's creation, and it's a transcendent moment, I find. And I haven't done all 54 or 53, however many there are now. I know one was downgraded because it lost a foot. I forget which one, but you know, there's 54, 53, 14ers here. You know, you feel sorry for the one that's 13,999. It just doesn't get the respect. But nonetheless, God made those mountains, and the 360 view just reminds you of the wonderful creation that we're in the midst of, and it takes your breath away. You know, if the hike hasn't already taken your breath away. And for me, it brings out the grateful attitude of love, for God and for each other. And it's so I like the fact that that's part of the story too.
For the beauty of all creation, remind us of all that God has done in this world, how small we are in such a massive place, and yet given the responsibility, this great responsibility, to go down the mountain and love each other. May it be so.